when talking with non-vegans, the topic of crop deaths often comes up all the time. And the non-vegan will often criticize the vegan for killing insects, moles, mice, and destroying entire ecosystems for their crops. And thus they're accusing the vegan of being hypocritical, all ground that we've covered already, right?
Yes.
This, of course, misses the point, since veganism is about reducing as much pain as possible, at least as you've specified. It depends on the vegan, but like that tends to be the case. And a vegan diet requires less crop deaths than an omnivore one. However, how does the vegan justify eating at a deliberate calorie surplus? You are called lifting vegan logic, and you're interested in bodybuilding, but to build muscle, you must eat at a calorie surplus. Are you not unnecessarily hurting animals by requiring a greater number of crop deaths?
So, two things. Number one, I definitely have a bias here, right? Because I bodybuild and such. Number two, it isn't true that you need to be in a calorie surplus to build muscle. Although it certainly helps.
Really? You don't at all? Or
in the beginner phases?
Newbie gains.
Yeah,
newbie gains.
Yeah,
That's true. Right. That's very true, yeah.
But you mean like after the intermediate phase and stuff?
Yep, you've had your newbie gains and it's like, right, I've been looking up the bros now and I realised that I need probably over 100 grams of protein a day, and I'm going to need to eat at a surplus, maybe 400-500 calories extra a day.
So, I mean, this question kind of comes back to what I said earlier about crop fields possibly being a good thing. I'm agnostic on this, of course, but it could, like, imagine what you said before when you asked me, like, oh, what if crop fields were actually good? It might even be a good thing to be in a calorie surplus, right, in this scenario. Now, because I'm agnostic on the moral status of crop fields, I'm going to be agnostic, I guess, on my answer here. But at the same time, crop deaths to me don't really seem to be rights violations.
Let me rephrase it then. So let's say that, you've got your crops, and a community has their crops, and it's, say, I don't know really the space, but let's just say it's got a quantity of 10. Like, that's the space that you need for your crops. And then everyone, they watch online Arnold Schwarzenegger and they're like, wow, like, that guy has got a hell of a chest. I want that chest. He's done it completely naturally, of course. And they say to themselves, okay, so I want that. How am I going to get that? Okay, we're going to all, as a community, just start eating more food, because it's going to be, we get our newbie gains and then we're going to need to eat more. Well, what does that mean? It means that, we only had that unit of 10 for our crop space. We now need 13, at least. We probably need a bit more. So you have to go out there and conquer more of nature in order to have that. So is your view that that's just not a problem at all? Or is it, like, how does that feed into your view of crops?
Well, this is it's funny because this being such a smaller scale example, I would just input in the hypothetical, let's find some area of nature where there's not that many animals. But if it's going to be like a mass thing, that's where there might be some amount of like sacrifice. But so let's assume that there's no, you kind of have to expand your farmland, and this may require, I guess, like pushing out animals or whatnot. In this small scenario, where I think it'd be more practical to say, like, guarantee that the area of land that you what's the word, use to cultivate plants is better. You probably should just do that type of thing. But it's tough, right? Because it comes back to like our concept of property and like when does this set of 10 humans do?
They have to expand.
Yeah, they have to expand, right?
And also, like, if the number's the problem, we can just increase it. We can say 1 million. There's 1 million people. We say 1 billion. It doesn't really matter. The principle, what I'm trying to test here, is that you're going into nature, you're taking stuff that wasn't yours. So what I'm doing is I'm saying that the defense of saying it's our land and you can defend your property doesn't work here, because you're having to go and you're having to take land. You're having to be doing what the Europeans did, right? Not too long ago. You have to go in places and put a flag down and go, that's ours now. And then you see a mole over there and you shoot it, essentially. That's what happens with crops. And again, for people watching, I know that that's still better than, having that land for a cow. But the principle is still that you don't need to do it, and you're doing it for entirely cosmetic reasons. This isn't needed at all. It's entirely just so that you can put on a bit of muscle.
Yeah, I guess it would just, I'd have to know maybe because when I think of like this whole expanding croplands and because you're eating more thing, what I said earlier was, I'm not sure about the difference between wildland and cropland in terms of death, right? So if I were to be arguing from a place of like trying to post, like you said, what was it, post hoc, like justified, we would just want to hope that crop fields are just better, and like maybe there's some sort of utility gain as a result or something like that, right? But that's why I really want to know, what is the difference between crop and not from you, I'm saying in general, like crop fields and wild fields, like because that would be obviously the justifier. At the moment, I'm just not convinced that it'd be a problem in terms of like death on the net.
I want to approach what your agnosticism is there. So I suppose if I said to you, look, here's a gun, and you're going to shoot in that direction into a target, but the target is concealed. It's concealed by trees. And because you're agnostic, you don't know that the path is clear. You might well shoot someone. However, you don't need to shoot. Like, it's not necessary. But if you pull that trigger, and because you're agnostic, you don't know if the person's there, you've got a chance of shooting someone, I would assume that you wouldn't pull the trigger until that agnosticism was cleared. Shouldn't your agnosticism be exactly the same when applied to not knowing whether or not cultivating land for crops is going to cause more harm?
So I will say that there is some data at the very least comparing crop fields to pasture land and like levels of trophic strata, which is like which tells you like levels of distinct levels of species, and that can translate to levels of predation. So crop fields at the very least have been shown to be better than pasture, and then the wild field scenario isn't necessarily proven, right? But I still think there's some, because of how horrific, in my opinion, nature is. I just think like when you say agnostic in this scenario, I think I don't know if there's like, we don't say there's like a spectrum to being agnostic, but like I have some reason to believe, right, that this crop field could be better than say a wild field. Does that make sense? Whereas with this situation, it's like I could just not shoot this gun, and I know for sure that shooting this gun is either going to do nothing, or hurt someone, but it's not going to like increase prevent death. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it seems to me that I could say to you, look, shooting that gun, you don't need to do it. It's completely cosmetic. And in this sense, that's a parallel to bodybuilding. You just don't need to do it. You just want to do it. It's a recreational kind of thing. Bodybuilding, going to go shooting, they're recreational. So they've got the symmetry there. I might be wrong, but I think that basically every human, and especially someone that thinks about ethics, the level of agnosticism, if we're going to do it by a percentage, is to such a degree that I don't think that you would pull the trigger if there was even a 1% chance that you could hit a human.
I agree.
Like, that's way too high. In fact, you would probably want... But then does that translate to your agnosticism when it comes to crops? Like, do you think that there's only a 1% chance that cultivating that wild land is going to cause equal or more harm?
I guess I can't give you an answer here. Not because I'm dodging. I literally just don't know. Like it's not like the data on wildland suffering, like while it's there, I've only looked into it a little bit. I'm not like crazy familiar with it to give you like a very precise answer, but I see what you're getting at. And it's definitely like just an interesting dilemma, Yeah,
it's something to think about. It's like, it just seems to me that it really just happens to be the case that if you're agnostic, if it would be less than 1% you would need to be able to shoot that gun, which, as you said, it would be, I don't understand really why you would operate being able to eat the surplus calories when you're not way more sure. Like, I don't know what the threshold would be for it when it comes to cultivating that land. And then there's another consideration, and that is that you would say that gorillas have rights, and you would say that mice have rights. But if you take a little bit of land away from a mice, from mice, it might just be, you might be able to show actually this doesn't devastate them. However, if you take a little bit of land away from a gorilla, it ruins them. And it's like, how do you like balance this kind of like complexity in things? And why is it that, because effectively you're treating one of them as if they've got less rights because it's a consideration that you want, and that is more land in order to produce more calories. It's it's one of those more difficult questions, at least by my lights.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on the degree to which they're affected by the land expansion. Because like if it's affecting a gorilla like insanely versus doesn't so much affect a mouse, then you would make the decision based on that. Like, oh, okay, well this mouse doesn't seem to experience much detriment based on this decision, but the gorilla does. Maybe we shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
But it's all going to come back to like doing the utilitarian calculus and trying to reason if the position, passes that threshold of utility gain. But yeah, no, I'm not sure. I mean, I'll be honest, like bodybuilding and eating in a calorie surplus surely doesn't make the universe that much better, right? It's just people getting big and staring at themselves. And sure, there's some well-being generated by that level of narcissism or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's not something that we need to do.
I think that there is an element of a consequentialist argument you could put in favor of bodybuilding as a vegan. One of the things that goes around in meat-eating circles a lot is that vegans are skinny and they're not very healthy. And so actually you may be able to make a utilitarian argument to say, listen, I'm going to have a higher chance of getting people to consider veganism if I put on muscle mass. And one of the reasons when I went vegetarian, I decided to hit the gym a little bit more, is because people were telling me you can't build muscle mass. And then now I've got to the point where some people are surprised when they learn I'm veggie. They're like, oh, where do you get it from? I'm like, dude, there's been a Mr. Olympia that was vegetarian. It's not a problem. But like,
so we can posit that the tribe is on social media and they're trying to promote veganism, and that's the utility is that passes the threshold for it to be justified. I'm just fucking around, but yeah.
No, but you actually you could say like you could say, look, if I can show you that we're going to convince more people to join, the bros in the gym and thus not be eating 5 chicken breasts every day by eating an extra 20%, 30% calories, then under utilitarianism, that seems that you could do that. That's fair. However, here's one that I think is a little bit more harder. This question's going to get me in trouble, but are fat vegans immoral? So just as bodybuilding necessitates deliberately eating at a calorie surplus, which entails causing additional crop deaths, we can apply the same logic to fat vegans. Are fat vegans violating their own principles when eating a calorie surplus?
Yeah, so my answer, it's funny because like the little justification you gave for the bodybuilding one won't apply here, because how are you going to be promoting veganism by being out of shape or whatever?
Exactly.
So I guess the answer would still come back to what I said before about not being sure about the moral status of crop fields, because like fat vegans could actually be doing the world a service in terms of reducing animal death, but we don't know. Obviously, I'm not going to have a firm stance on that. I haven't this entire time, but without that justification to promote veganism, I mean, and you hold everything else constant, it's definitely going to be more problematic. Now, I do wonder if like certain high calorie, this is just me thinking out loud, if certain high calorie plant foods can actually have less crop deaths than because certain foods obviously are higher calorie per volume, and that might make it so that if you want to be a fat vegan, you just eat this particularly high caloric density food, and you'll actually have less crop deaths than someone eating less than you, but who's supporting these crops, which have more crop deaths, so I think that's something just funny to think about. But when we get to this territory, it seems like we're just kind of shooting this shit in terms of the philosophy,
You see, like, this is where I think that it's actually really important, because as soon as we start talking about naming traits and we start getting into philosophical considerations with a man under a city being tortured and things like that, I think we are in the realm of asking these difficult questions. And they're hard, like they're really hard. And as someone that my diet is like 95% vegan. I eat very little amount of eggs, very little amount of milk. I eat a lot of fake meats. I like fake meats, which probably means my footprint's a bit higher than someone that, I don't know, eats bulgur wheat for the 10th time in a day. But I always get frustrated when vegans act like their shit doesn't stink. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's okay if we're in a position where it's like, look, living just has these problems. And I find that these kinds of considerations humbles me as a vegetarian to realize that my position wasn't quite as I'm good, you're bad kind of thing. And I don't know if you've had that experience from studying these philosophical things yourself, but I found that it eroded my confidence in a strong way.
Yeah. The thing is, like, with veganism too, and like the whole, like, some vegans will say, oh, like, we live in a non-vegan world, so my vegan actions still entail something that I don't like. So for example, if we had like a vegan world, chances are I think crop deaths would be like minimized in greatly, assuming again that they were actually a bad thing with respect to nature. Because if you had like a vegan world that wanted to mass prevent animal suffering, but crop yields were good, maybe we keep them the way they are. Who knows? But yeah, so vegans will say that, and I don't like to say, oh, like a vegan diet is cruelty free. Depends how you define cruelty, right? Because some vegans may define it as violating animal rights, and if you don't take, defending your food as a rights violation, maybe that's not so cruel after all. It's going to depend who you're speaking with, but yeah, there is like some, like, I don't think the vegan lifestyle is like necessarily perfect, right? I don't think, and acknowledging that is fine. And it can maybe help your interlocutor understand that you're just doing like something like the best you can. And veganism is a good representation of one of those things. With your